Of course, in this video, we will focus on the mathematical and not the linguistic side, which of course takes priority over understanding the Qur'an. But our topic here is the mathematics. Like all codes, there must be a key. And in the Qur'an, I have noted in previous videos how chapter 1 is the mother of the Qur'an. And of course, it is the most important surah. For example, in prayers, you must recite it at the start of every rak'ah while praying. Thinking about how this number 19 can do all of this and be a major sign, we look closely at the Qur'an. Sheikh Bassam Jarrar highlights that we find that the very first verse in the entire Qur'an, chapter 1, verse 1, has a total of exactly 19 letters. The first verse, number 19, in the entire Qur'an has exactly 19 words. The first chapter that was revealed in the Qur'an was Surah Al-Alaq, and it is exactly 19 verses. Furthermore, the order of Surah Al-Alaq from the end of the Qur'an is 19, and the total letters of this chapter are exactly 285, which is a multiple of 19. Subhanallah. The last surah that was revealed is Surah Al-Nasr. Its first verse is 19 letters. This last revealed surah, its total words are 19. The total chapters of the Qur'an are 114, which again is a multiple of 19. Subhanallah, something unique is going on here, and thus we continue to contemplate this. Keeping in mind that the Qur'an is 114 surahs, i.e. chapters, those from Qur'anway.com highlight that the first letter in the Qur'an is the letter Ba, B, and it repeated in the first 114 words exactly 19 times. But how can we know? It's not by chance. So we check and we see that the last letter in the Qur'an is the letter Sin, S, and it repeated in the last 114 words exactly 19 times. Subhanallah, the mathematical balance and harmony is endless. The first verse in the Qur'an, the first chapters revealed, the first verse number 19, and even the first and last single letter in the Qur'an are all again highlighting the number 19. We explained that the number 19 was mentioned and explained in Surah Al-Muddathir, chapter 74. In this chapter, which mentioned the number 19, when we look at verse 19, we find that it contains 3 words. Of course, if we multiply the verse number 19 by the number of words, we get 57. But what is 57? Let's keep this in mind for now and move on. Is there even more regarding this number of words being 3 and its relation to the verse number, which is 19? Adding one of my own findings to these made by others, let me note that verse 19 in this chapter has 3 words, and the verse that mentioned the number 19, i.e. verse 30, also has 3 words. What mathematical harmony is going on here? Why is the mention of 19 in a 3-word verse, and its chapter's 19th verse also 3 words? Amazingly, I found that in the entire Qur'an, the number of chapters that have exactly 19 verses is 3. Subhanallah, the perfect harmony continues. If this is all about multiples of 19, and we saw earlier the pattern of firsts, just like we had seen the relationship of 19 with the first letter in the Qur'an, the first verse in the Qur'an, the first revelation, and so on, I wanted to check the relationship of 19 and its multiples in the first chapter in the Qur'an, with 19 verses. The first chapter in the Qur'an with 19 verses is Surah Al-Infitar, chapter 82. 82 times 19 equals 1558, 1558. So what is 1558? I was shocked to find that 1558 is the sum total of all verses number 19 in the entire Qur'an. Subhanallah, there are exactly 82 verses, number 19, in the Qur'an, and chapter 82 is 19 verses, and of course 19 times 82 gives the total sum of all their verse numbers. This is stunning. But it doesn't end here, because I then found that the 82nd verse from the start of the Qur'an is 19 words. Subhanallah. But again, it doesn't end here. This verse had 19 words, but what about letters? Well, I checked, and it has exactly 76 letters, which is also a multiple of 19. I must resist following every thread, so let's get back on track. If there are exactly 82 chapters in the Qur'an that have a verse number 19, or in other words, 82 verses 19 in the Qur'an, which highlighted 19 in chapter 82, this means that the chapters in the entire Qur'an that do not have a verse 19 are 32. Since this is revolving around chapter numbers and verses, I went to chapter 32 and found that verse 19 in chapter 32 has exactly 57 letters. Subhanallah. Again, we see 57 highlighted, which takes us back to 3 times 19. 3 is the number of words in the relevant verses in the chapter where number 19 is highlighted and addressed. And 3 is the number of chapters in the Qur'an that are 19 verses, and all the rest that we had already mentioned. All of this is still just the lead we took from the first chapter in the Qur'an with 19 verses. But what about the last chapter in the Qur'an that has 19 verses? It is Surah Al-Alaq, which earlier we mentioned is the first chapter revealed in the Qur'an, and its total letters are exactly 285, which again is a multiple of 19. Of course, for more about this chapter, see its mention in previous videos. But let's get back to where we started, to the chapter where 19 was mentioned and discussed. I noticed that the very important word, qaddar, decreed, measured, account, and so on, was not only mentioned in verse 19, but was also mentioned nowhere else in this chapter except 3 consecutive times, as the last word in verses 18, 19, and 20. I could go into how the total words for these verses is 10, and the total letters in the 3 qaddar words is also 10, because first form of the word was 4 letters, not 3, and that from verse 19 up until the mention of 19 are 10 verses. In fact, the total letters in these verses is 57. So again, we see 57 highlighted. And so on. But that is not the thread I want to follow here. The appearance of this word 3 times, and it being a 3-letter word, and its appearance in verse 19 made me look closer. So I did, and found that the numerical letter value of the word qaddar itself was 304, which again is a multiple of 19, in the form of 19 times 16. Of course, if we follow the number 16, we end up with what is beyond breathtaking. Just see the mind-blowing episode 8 in the series about the bees. Furthermore, this relationship to qaddar is closely related to the word al-qadar, which also appeared 3 times in its own chapter, Surah Al-Qadr. And to see what that led to, see episode 4. Then we see that the qaddar, i.e. to measure or to account, verses, total letters are exactly 31. But what is 31? As you probably guessed it, 31 is the verse number of the verse where the number 19 was explained. Then we find that the qaddar verses, verse number sum total, again gives us 57. So again 57 has been highlighted by the code of 19 in this chapter. But again we ask, why 57? So verse 19 in the chapter which mentions the number 19 and explains its importance is 3 words. And as we said, 3 times 19 equals 57. And the sum total of the qaddar verses numbers is again 57. And the mention of 19 was in a 3-word verse, which again takes us to 57, as 19 times 3. So why is 57 being repeatedly highlighted? Why not another multiple of 19? Keep in mind that the theme of first verse in the Qur'an is 19 letters, first chapter revealed is 19 verses, and so on. Now let's look at this finding by Sheikh Bassam Jarrar. Subhanallah, the chapter that states 19 and highlights how important it is, its first 19 verses contain exactly 57 words, which is a multiple of 19. And this 19th verse has 3 words. So 3 times 19 is the verse's own math, telling us how many words exactly there are from the start of the chapter up to this verse. That's astonishing. But this word count code doesn't stop here. Shockingly, the verse which specifically tells us that this number 19 will open up all this Qur'an code and be a great sign has exactly 57 words. This is stunning mathematical harmony. Verse 19 has 3 words, and the verse in which 19 was mentioned is also 3 words, and 19 times 3 equals 57, which is exactly how many words there are in the first 19 verses, and the verse that follows the mention of 19 and explains why it's an important number is also exactly 57 words. Subhanallah, the perfect mathematical harmony is beautiful. But what's there about this verse number being 31 for the verse which explains the number 19 and is 57 words? Do you remember in episode 6 what we found about chapter 1 and the number 31? Chapter 1 is the mother of the Qur'an, and verse 1 in chapter 1 is 19 letters. We also saw in other episodes how closely connected the code of chapter 1 is to the rest of the Qur'an. Remember that verse 19 in the chapter that highlights the number 19 has exactly 3 words. And in that same chapter, the number 19 is mentioned in a verse with 3 words. Now, think about this part of that episode 6. The first verse alone is comprised of 19 letters, and 19 is the greatest Qur'an mathematical key. The surprising thing is that the researchers have found the following. The shortest verse has only 2 words and it is verse number 3.